Welcome back to ChatBoxin. I'm Legion, the Louisville legend, aka 3XL, aka Mr. AKA. This is ChatBoxin, where I bring the questions and AI brings the smoke. My AI partner or co-host, as always, is Miles. Miles, say what's good, pimpin'.
Hey, glad to be here. What's the question, Legion?
All right, here we go. Today, we are sparring over Project 2025. Quick disclaimer before we get started. AI can be wrong. This is a commentary place. This is for commentary and learning. This is no legal advice, nothing like that going on. So don't be trying to put us on some papers on lawsuits and things of that nature, all right? Bet. Okay, here we go. Miles, round one. Ding, ding. Can you define Project 2025 for us in plain English so that the people at home can understand what the heck we talking about before we get too deep into the woods?
Checking that. Right, plain English. It's a detailed policy blueprint put together by conservative organizations, not a law. It outlines how a future conservative administration might reshape federal agencies, expand presidential control, and shift priorities on issues like immigration, education, energy, and government structure. Some proposals could be done by executive action, but many would require Congress or face legal challenges.
All right, bet. So who made it and what type of document is it? Is it a plan, a blueprint? I know it's not a law, but like, how would you describe it?
Checking that. It's a policy blueprint, a set of recommendations organized by the Heritage Foundation with input from multiple conservative groups. Think of it like a playbook, not automatic policy, but a roadmap that a like minded administration could choose to adopt fully, in part, or ignore.
Okay, so what is it trying to do at a high level? How government would be running it, staffing it, prioritizing, etc.
Checking that. At a high level, it aims to reshape the executive branch to be more directly controlled by the president, shift federal policy toward conservative priorities, change staffing by replacing or reclassifying some career civil servants, reorganize or eliminate agencies the authors see as unnecessary, and reduce regulations in many areas. Broadly, it's about steering the federal government's role to be smaller in scope and more ideologically conservative.
Okay, well, that's round one. Let's get into round two. What's real and what's cap? Let's do this mythology check here. What Project 2025 can do versus what it cannot do by itself?
Checking that. In plain English, what it can do is serve as a governing roadmap. A president could use parts of it to guide executive orders, agency leadership choices where the law allows, and policy priorities for how departments enforce existing laws. What it cannot do by itself is become law, change the Constitution, or create new federal agencies. Those require Congress and or would face court challenges. So influence, yes. Automatic force, no.
All right. So then, what would it require from Congress, courts, agencies, budget, or time? What is it? How does this happen? How do they make this thing a thing?
Checking that. That's the civics part. Some moves the president can make directly, like executive orders. Congress must pass any actual changes to federal law. Agencies have to write regulations that can take months or years. Courts can block parts they rule unconstitutional, and budgets depend on congressional funding. So, implementation would be piecemeal, subject to elections, legal challenges, and available funding.
All right. So what parts are recommendations and what parts are immediate actions, if any?
Let me check. The key here is that Project 2025 itself doesn't contain immediate actions. Recommendations that the president might act on quickly include executive orders, agency leadership appointments, and directing agencies to review regulations. Things that cannot happen immediately include changing federal laws, eliminating or creating agencies Congress established, major tax or spending changes, or constitutional amendments. Those need legislation, rulemaking, and sometimes court approval.
Okay. That's round two, people. Let's get into round three. Ding ding. The levers. How it how would it actually happen? How do they implement how are they implementing this thing? Are we already seeing the implementation of Project 2025 now with our current administration, or is it still just a work in progress or a theory?
Checking that. Based on what has happened, it looks like some elements align with the blueprint, mostly through executive orders, personnel choices, and agency rulemaking. But it's not an on off switch. It's a mix of adopted, proposed, and unimplemented ideas. Courts are reviewing some actions, and other proposals would need Congress to act. So, not purely theoretical, but not a complete program either. It's more like a blueprint influencing parts of the current agenda, not a fully enacted policy set.
Okay, so then how would executive branch hire or handle staffing, hiring approaches? How does the leadership change and shape agencies based on 2025? And again, are these things that are being implemented, as you can tell, in the current times?
Let me check that. The biggest staffing idea is to give the president more control over senior personnel and agency leadership. Supporters call it making government more accountable. Critics warn it politicizes the civil service. Some steps resembling that approach have been taken by the current administration, but not fully implemented, and some measures are tied up in court.
So you don't think it's happening currently. It just appears that it's being informed with current decisions are being informed by 2025, not a strict at putting it together type situation.
Checking that. Right, that's the distinction I'd make. It's more accurate to say the administration has taken actions that overlap with or resemble some recommendations in Project 2025. Influence, definitely. Direct implementation as an official government program, that's a stretch. Many ideas mirror long standing conservative policy goals, so cause and direct project ownership are hard to prove. So, best phrasing is overlap and alignment rather than formal implementation of the document itself.
Okay, so agency rulemaking enforcement policies, um, according to 2025, what gets enforced hard and what gets ignored?
Checking that. Project 2025 doesn't say ignore the law, it recommends shifting enforcement priorities. More emphasis on immigration, religious liberty, obscenity laws, less on environmental regulations and diversity initiatives. But agencies can't just ignore statutes. They can adjust where to focus limited resources. Those choices can be challenged in court.
Okay, so while we're talking about regulations, executive orders, and legislations and all that good stuff, give me a quick, what's the difference between executive orders versus regulations versus legislation? What are the main differences?
Sure. Legislation is laws passed by Congress. Executive orders are instructions from the president to federal agencies within existing law. Regulations are detailed rules that agencies write to carry out those laws. Think Congress writes the rules of the game. The president coaches the team within those rules, and the agencies are like referees detailing the rule book for enforcement. So each has different authority and limits.
Okay, so then what would be the judicial challenges? What can get sued and what gets stalled?
Checking that. Short answer, executive orders can get sued if they're seen as exceeding legal authority. Agency regulations are frequently challenged and can be delayed or struck down. Laws passed by Congress can also be challenged, but the standard is different. Courts can pause implementation with injunctions. Basically, the courts act as referee if something potentially violates the Constitution or exceeds granted authority.
All right. That's round three. Let's jump on into round four. Who benefits and who pays? Who's our winners and losers? Because, that's what we care about, right? All right. So when it comes to federal employees and agencies, job security, independence, and turnover, do they win? Do they lose? What's the deal with that?
Checking that. Depends on your angle. Career federal employees could see less job security if staffing changes make it easier to replace policy roles. Supporters call that a win for accountability. Critics call it a loss for civil service independence. Agencies might become more responsive to presidential priorities, but could face more turnover, which can hurt continuity. So, winner or loser really depends on values. Whether you prize political control or professional independence, that's the core trade off.
All right. Let's switch to the next one. Business, regulation changes, compliance costs, enforcement risk, winners, losers, etc. Same thing.
Checking that. For businesses, mixed picture. Some winners could be industries facing less federal regulation. Some losers could be businesses that built models around existing rules and could face uncertainty or new compliance expectations. Enforcement priorities could shift too, leading to more scrutiny in some areas and less in others. It's not universally good or bad. It depends on the industry. Basically, the rule changes rather than decides winners and losers outright.
All right. What about everyday people? Services, rights enforcement, benefit excess, winners, losers. What is it?
Checking that. For everyday people, it's mixed. Supporters say potential winners include people who favor smaller government and fewer regulations. Potential losers, according to critics, include people relying on federal programs that could shrink or change. Rights enforcement shifts with priorities, but the laws remain on the books. Net impact depends on which parts get implemented and upheld.
All right, last one in this round. States and local governments. More responsibility shifted down or no?
Checking that. Generally, yes. The blueprint trends toward shifting responsibility from federal to state and local levels. Supporters call that flexibility and a win for federalism principles. Critics worry about uneven services and rights protections varying by state. It means more local discretion, but also more variation depending on where you live. So, impact really depends on your state resources and priorities.
Okay, so in the real world, there's a whole lot of back and forth about whether 2025, Project 2025, is racist or white supremacist rhetoric, etc., etc. What is your take on that?
Checking that. My take, it's important to distinguish between the text, interpretations, and impact. Some critics say certain proposals could disproportionately harm minority communities. Supporters say the policies are race neutral and rooted in conservative governance, not racial ideology. So it's not a verified fact claim like it's a Heritage Foundation blueprint. But impacts can be debated. If you're aiming for evidence based commentary, say it's a policy blueprint whose effects are disputed, not definitively racist or not. That keeps facts separate from interpretation.
Okay, so let's use logic with this. So, given the individuals that are attempting to make this thing happen in conjunction with their history, do you see the through line of where this could be perceived as a race-based white supremacist program?
Checking that. I don't see a single through line, but I do see why people connect those dots. The backgrounds of some affiliated figures and proposed policy impacts are different questions. It's fair to examine both, but evidence versus interpretation matters. Saying it is a white supremacist program goes beyond what can be objectively proven. Better to distinguish documented policy proposals from interpretations about motives or impacts.
All right, y'all. That was it. That was the round. That was the box. That was all. It was it. This was ChatBoxin. As always, if I stepped on any of your toes, lace up a pair of those bright boots and stand on business. Comment, bugging, or valid in the comment sections. Let us know what you think. If you had any situations where you've come across Project 2025 and how it's affected you in your life, and let us know what's going on. If you got any topics or things that you want us to chop it up about, let us know. We'll put it in the next episode, possibly. Until then, this is ChatBoxin. We out.